Welcome to the Body Lock. It's your man Ant Walker, joined by my friends Matt Wells and Drake Ridge. We are here to discuss UFC 254, specifically the main and the co-main, just how that looks like from the X's and O's standpoint, as much as we can in our uninformed opinion. So here we go. Matt, Drake. Now, this is definitely a fight that's obviously very important. When we're talking about legacies, Khabib Nurmagomedov is undoubtedly on the short list for greatest lightweight in MMA history. If he gets through Justin Gaethje, do you think that cements his legacy in that spot?
I think he's already cemented that. It's just a point of right now, how does he close out his career? He was talking about wanting to retire at 30-0 as 2 fights from now. So what happens, goes out there and gets this win. What's going to be that one to send him off into the sunset if he does stick to that? I do believe he is a guy that will stick to whatever he says because judging by how he's carried himself up to this point in his career, he's stuck by his word every single time. So if he says he's going out at 30-0, I believe it. It's just what's that big send-off fight that we're going to get? Before we start talking about though, obviously he's got a pretty tough testing Justin Gaethje standing in his way right now, and I don't think this is going to be the walk in the park that judging by his previous fights, that a lot of people think it could be.
Okay. So Drake, just a quick pick. How do you see this one playing out? Who you think is the W?
Boy. It's tough, man, because I think that Gaethje is a really probably, this isn't crazy to say. I think a lot of people feel this way that he is the toughest matchup that will Habib will have fought so far to this point. Out of all these crazy 28 opponents that he has fought so far, Gaethje I think matches up pretty well with him. Um, and he's just got something about him, man. He's got that fighting spirit and that don't give a fuck kind of attitude where I think that's very important against somebody like Habib, where he doesn't seem very afraid. Some people might be defeated before they even get in the cage with the guy who's, on this incredible winning streak, almost 30-0. Um, but man, at the same time, it's like that guy is nearly 30. He's dominated essentially everybody he's fought, with maybe some exceptions of a Gleison Tebow, as we mentioned last week. I do think that he won that fight, though. I will tell you, just not to get into that. But obviously, that wasn't the typical domination from Habib that we've seen since then and before then. But yeah, it's hard. I think that Habib has kind of reached that point where not to the same effect as some fighters, like let's say an Amanda Nunes or in kickboxing, Tenshin Nasukawa. I've mentioned this recently. Those fighters who have reached that point of, man, I just can't pick against them until we see them actually lose. Like they're at that level of greatness. I don't think Habib's quite there yet, just because of how good the lightweight division is and all these guys. And Gaethje has all the tools to test him. Obviously, the big question mark is his wrestling, if we'll get to see it and how good it is. It's kind of like that hidden weapon of his that he hasn't used since like his first 3 fights or whatever. Like you've seen the old clip of him getting that slam knockout. Like, where's that guy been? Obviously he doesn't need to be that guy, but if he's got that in his back pocket, that is essential against Habib. And then on the feet, obviously, I think it's safe to say he's the better striker. Not to say that Habib isn't a pretty solid striker. It's just no one thinks of his striking as much because of how much better his ground game is than his striking, which is saying a lot because his striking is not bad at all. But Gaethje, obviously, we've seen is just a destroyer on the feet and getting better and better, more technical, all this stuff. So, man, it's as exciting and awesome as I think Justin pulling this off would be, which I think he can. I can't pick against Habib till he loses. 28-0. Once he gets that one out of the way, they're like, all right, this guy is actually human. He is beatable, but can't go against him till then. So Habib is my pick.
I'm kind of struggling with the idea of picking against Khabib. Also, I mean, the history's proven itself, and I would put him in the category of an Amanda Nunes or in kickboxing Tenshin Nasukawa. They're just those people who it's just silly to pick against a lot of times. That being said, Justin Gaethje is probably the toughest style matchup. As you said, I would say Tony Ferguson might still be a more difficult style matchup just because of the problems he presents on bottom. But if and the weird thing about this matchup too is we will see very quickly who's going to control this. I'm not with Matt as far as this being going to be a close fight. No matter who wins, someone's getting steamrolled. Either one or two things is going to happen. Khabib is going to come out there, grab a hold of Justin, ragdoll him to the ground, and then we're going to see the same Khabib fight that we've seen 28 other times play out. Or we're going to see him try to get that takedown, Justin stuff it, and kick him in the leg as he goes back, and the look on Khabib's face changes, and then we're in for something different. Those are the only two ways this goes for me. I think that we're going to have one-way traffic, either guy winning. So from the pure technical standpoint, one thing that I do struggle with as far as favoring Justin in this is that we always talk about his leg kicks and how devastating they may be. They are incredibly devastating. He's very sneaky in the way he can get that to target. To see someone in what would normally be phone booth fighting distance and you're cracking leg kicks with consistency, that's not very common. But how often do you see a guy throw a leg kick against a really good grappler and find themselves on their back because that leg got caught? Then on top of that, you'll say Jay or Ben, I can't remember which one from Sherdog told me that, well, Khabib does keep that lead leg out pretty far, makes a great target. But if you know that leg kick is coming, maybe you stick it out a little further. Just bait him. And the way Khabib grapples, all he needs is to just give one little just feel of your skin, and you're getting grabbed, you're getting dragged down. I think it's very possible. I mean, we can talk about Justin Gaethje's wrestling, but it's still just talk. Like, it doesn't exist until we see it in the cage. And we have not seen it in the cage since, what, like his first or his second World Series of Fighting about, in the briefest of moments. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. Justin Gaethje, his wrestling doesn't exist until I see it. I think Khabib does what he always does.
See, I think it's going to be a little bit different than that. I think the only wrestling that we need to see from Gaethje is obviously his sprawl game. What's his sprawl game like? And I think he's the type of fighter that has that right amount of crazy. That's how I always describe him. So where he will stand in the fire, he will stand in that range with Khabib and try to throw that leg kick just to see what happens when he does it. Like, can I stay here? Am I safe here to get my strikes off, throw this leg kick, and still stuff this dude's takedowns? I think he's that type of guy. He's like, you're going to have to prove it to me that you can do this to me. And that's what we've seen from Gaethje throughout his entire career. You can think back to all of these wars that this dude has had, and he just never seems to back down from anything. He's always the type of guy that's going to really walk through fire to get a W. And he's going to have to do that this weekend in order to do that, to come away not as the undisputed champion. So it's going to be I think it's going to be a hell of a fight, man. I don't necessarily see one guy dominating the fight. If that is the case, I think it's going to be later on in the fight, like third round, fourth round, when the fatigue starts to set in. I can then see one guy pulling away. I don't see it being like a real close fight all the way down to the end of the fifth round. If it goes to a decision, I can see one fighter pulling away in the later rounds. Early on, though, first round, second round, I can see it absolutely being back and forth, real close type of fight.
Well, that's the thing, just to jump in here. I think that you mentioned probably the most important thing about Gaethje in this fight. Forget his mythical wrestling, this kind of unicorn of a skill set that he has. Let's say that he just doesn't act. It looks like he doesn't have any wrestling, right? Just goes out there and gets just put on his back easily and all this. But the thing is, Khabib is a dominator, right? He's a very dominant fighter. He breaks you down over a period of time. His fastest finish is probably what that Thiago Tavares one, which was like maybe 2 minutes in his like second or third fight in the UFC. Don't see that very often from him. He can submit you, he can, finish you with strikes and all that, but typically it is around the third round or later on in rounds. Gaethje, you can dominate him for as long as you want, but he's going to be in it and dangerous the entire time. I don't think there's any questions about his gas tank anymore, though we kind of had those questions before, this Gaethje 2.0 kind of guy that we've seen since he lost his first two fights. I think that he's kind of, shored up those question marks and all that. So, I mean, maybe it'll be different if he does get, laid on by somebody who's so heavy on top as Khabib. But at the same time, he's still going to be lethal in every single round. And as long as Khabib keeps him in the fight, without finishing Gaethje, I think that the chances of Gaethje's are pretty equal to, being able to find something there because this guy isn't gonna go away. I think he's confident enough to test, using those leg kicks and threatening himself to be exposed to takedowns because he just doesn't care, man. He's a gamer. He's like, "All right, I got all this time to work." He's not afraid of, he goes in there to die. Like, that's the thing about him is he's open to these crazy wars, even though we've seen a more calculated version of him. I just think that his attitude about never quitting is going to be a really big deal against somebody like Habib in this situation.
You know what? As much as I agree with you guys about Gaethje's like never die attitude, I don't think it's really applicable here. Because you're gonna get with Khabib the way he dominates you. It's not. And you're saying he walks in, prepared to die, which is very true. He does seem to have that mentality walking in there. But with Khabib, it's not the typical death. It's death by 1,000 cuts. It's not something that you can necessarily prep yourself for. It's just you get overwhelmed and overwhelmed and overwhelmed. I think if we see Gaethje on his back, just getting slapped around and getting in the handcuff position and uppercutted from there, we start seeing all these crazy, just dominant positions against him. This the pure panic that you have on a natural physiological level is going to gas him out more. Riding, having to ride out with Khabib's dead weight on top of you, it's going to gas him out. And then when he gets up to start the next round, if he survives that, I mean, those arms are going to be like noodles. Maybe he still has power relative to the division, but not what he is capable of without, having had a bear wrestling maniac laying on him for 5 to 10 minutes. So I really think that a lot of the credit we can give to Gaethje for how he has conducted himself in the cage over his career, it just doesn't seem to matter in this because this is not the sort of opponent like Eddie Alvarez and Dustin Poirier, Michael Johnson and Louis Palomino, and the people that have really tested Justin Gaethje. They didn't test him by reaching for a single leg and dragging him to the ground and laying on him and gassing him out and wearing him out against the fence. They didn't test him with that. They tested him by standing in the pocket and trading shots. That preparation for death is one thing, but not the way Khabib will kill you. It's much more methodical, and once it overtakes you, it's like quicksand. Like you can't help it. I don't think this is gonna be this sort of war that we've seen Gaethje go through before. This is a different sort of animal. This style matchup doesn't predicate itself to back and forth wars, in my opinion.
So can I add in something to kind of tie into what both of you guys just said? So Drake was talking about, the reinvention of Gaethje as we've seen in recent years. And you're talking about a different type of beatdown that he's going to be facing, right? Well, I think that all ties into really that evolution that Drake was hinting at, because once he lost to Poirier, when he came into the game, he was just like I was talking about, now he has the right amount of crazy. Back then it was just full on crazy. And that, you have to credit that to Trevor Whitman and the adjustments that he's put in with him. And, I used to we did a lot of interviews with Trevor Whitman back on the Slip and Dip podcast, talking about, are you going to reel him in a little bit? Like that. We asked him that multiple times, and we kind of actually started to see that over the recent outings, right? He dialed it down a little bit. He's a little bit more calculated in his risks. And I think that makes him a much more dangerous fighter. He goes out there and gets wins. Oh, stops Tony Ferguson. Like, what? Like, who does that? At this point, and it's just, I think his risk management has improved so much better, and understanding where he's at in his career and where his health is as well. I think he's going to come into this fight with a solid game plan. But again, if things start going haywire, he has that crazy that he can tap into. So you know what? Let's just get it and see what happens. But I don't know if that's going to be necessary here, as good as Khabib is. I think Gaethje is just that formidable of an opponent. And not to mention, on the betting line, this is his largest underdog in the UFC. Him being the largest his largest underdog. He's plus 260. His next largest underdog spot was against Ferguson, plus 180. So this is by far the biggest underdog he's been at the betting window. Obviously, a lot of people love to put their money on Khabib, and rightfully so. Khabib hasn't been an underdog since the fight that he lost, at least in T-Back. So, that's just where we are.
Another thing that I want to mention too about kind of the hidden wrestling, or the thing about Gaethje there is, and his confidence just in general is, he has come out and said he won't be able to do this, that he's the same thing that Habib does to everybody, right? He believes in his wrestling enough to where he thinks he'll be able to defend this and stop it. And of course, what do you expect from somebody? But my counterpoint to that is, Habib is one of those rare fighters, and I can make this comparison to Mackenzie Dern, right? I mean, that might sound weird just on an overall, looking at it, but hear me out here. Those fighters who have one particular level of their game that is just so incredibly above the rest, where when you go against them, you just need to accept that you are not good enough in this area to hang with them. So, I mean, for example, with Mackenzie Dern, these girls who are going against her, don't even bother trying. Don't even bother trying going to the ground with her and playing in the guard and doing all this stuff. It is not going to end up well. The chances are about 1%, to 99 for her that she's going to come out winning that position. With somebody like Khabib, we've seen this 28 times in a row, man. Just, it's good to believe in yourself, be confident. Of course, what do you expect, right? But at the same time, just don't play around in that area if you can avoid it, and it doesn't seem like on the surface that Gaethje's going to accept that. Maybe he's putting on a front, but I don't know. I believe him to be a guy who, there's so many things about the magnitude of the fight that where he kind of needs to be confident in himself in that area too. But at the same time, it's like, man, if we're going to be realistic about it, like the chances that you are going to be able to hang there, very slim, man. So I think that it's safe to say Khabib is one of those rare fighters, where that one part of their game far, far supersedes the rest of their game, and nobody else is on that level. And yes, I make that comparison with Mackenzie Dern as well.
That's a really good comparison, I think, because like you don't find in this age of MMA, you don't find too many one-trick ponies that are just so good at that one trick that there's nothing you can do about it. And that's kind of where we're at with Khabib and his wrestling. I'll take it back to UFC 229. I think the biggest mistake that Conor McGregor made when he fought Khabib was right when the fight started and he stuffed that initial shot. Instead of exiting and resetting, standing back up, and forcing Khabib to stand back up, he tried to get a dominant position over Khabib. He tried to take his back or something, and then from there, Khabib spun around, grabbed the leg, and then the cycle started that began to unravel McGregor. I can see Justin Gaethje making that very same mistake if he comes in there with an elevated mentality in regards to his wrestling. And he should be confident in his wrestling, but realize who you're fighting and leave it at that. Like, that's not the path of least resistance. The path of least resistance would be to deny that and crack them upside the head every chance you get. So I can very well see a world where Khabib goes in for the shot, gets stuffed, and Gaethje attempts to turn that into something else. And then we just have this cycle start where Khabib grabs enough of your body to do what he wants to do, finds a way to reverse position, and then here we are, this the typical Dagestani beatdown that he likes to give. So that is a very, very strong possibility in my mind, and I can't escape from that image of what happens if Gaethje intends on having somewhat of a wrestling battle with him.
No, I think the interesting part is going to be what happens if Khabib has success early and often getting him down. Will he? But he doesn't get him out of there. He's just keeping him pinned to the mat for 4 minutes, round one, 4.5 minutes in round two. Does he come out in round three and try to do what he did against Quinta? Because that's going to be a huge mistake. So I think he can't lose that focus. on keeping that pressure up, no matter how long the fight goes on, because Gaethje's not an easy out by any means. So that's where Khabib could potentially mess this thing up, no matter how dominant he is early on. Is do I go out there and try to get some strikes off? Because he's got the Iacunza thing in the bag where he's out there trying to do the Ali thing, and then he's also got a knockdown on Connor, which was a little bit more of a off balance thing. So is he that confident in his hands now? Like that's something that we can't dismiss at this point. Although I do think that he's going to be very, very comfortable in just excelling in the wrestling department.
Yeah, I agree. I like what you're saying there, but at the same time, Iaquinta, that was a very rare situation, though. Days notice and all that kind of craziness about that. But yeah, I mean, I think that Habib realizes kind of the levels of the opponents here, so I think he'll be fine with that. I mean, I'm sure that he will definitely strike a little bit just to see how it goes, because I mean, there were the rumors about him wanting to box and everything, so maybe his ego's inflating a bit about the striking. But as for the Iaquinta comparison, I get it, but I think that was such a that whole fight week, everything about that was madness. So I think that was kind of a rare situation there, and we kind of got some Roganized fans out there about that and how competitive that fight was or was not, but is what it is there.
Yeah, I think the boxing with Iaquinta started when he was very clear, like what he was dealing with, and knew how easily he could handle it. Like it just wasn't something that came out of a vacuum. He just decided, oh, I'm going to box today. And keep in mind too, like I know I've touched on this before, and it's something we've talked about recently here. Khabib is one of the more focused and and from a fight IQ standpoint, one of the smarter guys that we've seen in the cage recently. He doesn't take unnecessary risk. He really does not. And you think about, I think going back to that McGregor fight again, that knockdown that he scored on McGregor was not based on just okay, I'm standing there and striking with this guy. It's because he out wrestled him and faked the shot. To get McGregor to drop that nonstop takedown ability, they can just get you down, and you have to keep thinking about it. There's nothing you can do as far as your natural body reaction of, oh shit, I don't want that to happen to me again. So those hands drop, and then a hand smacks you upside the head. So Khabib has that option. If he starts off by dominating Gaethje on the ground, and then third or fourth round decides he wants to play around in the striking, yeah, that may not be the smartest thing in the world, but he's still probably is going to be relatively safe. Um, I do think that I don't want to discount Gaethje's chances at winning, because it probably sounds like I have. I just think that we're going to know very clearly when the fight starts who's going to be in control. I just don't see a scenario where, say, Khabib dominates him for 4 rounds, and then in the fifth they come out standing, and Gaethje just cracks him with a right hand, and it's lights out. And I don't see a scenario where Gaethje is just beating the crap out of Khabib and he's flailing around the cage, and then suddenly Khabib scores that takedown in the third round and just rides out a decision or a late submission or something. I don't see that possibility. But what I do see, the two most likely things I see, is someone getting railroaded.
Yeah, I mean it's a possibility, man. I just think it's going to be a hell of a fight from start to finish. I mean, it's just going to be hopefully it lives up to the billing is where I'm really kind of trying to convince myself. The interim champ versus the undisputed champ sort of thing. Like I want those fights to always live up to that billing, because it's rare that we get them in the UFC, and it's rare that we get them where it's the two guys that you really want to see fight for the titles. It's not like they found a way to fit Connor in here again or something like that. It's like this is legit number one, number two at this moment in 2020. So I'm glad that this is coming together, and I hope it's just hopefully knock on wood, we actually make it to Saturday and they both get into the cage with no BS that happens this week. COVID, stay away.
Yeah,
Yeah.
COVID already took his cousin, I think. That's
Oh
in his
yeah.
camp, in Khabib's camp. So yeah, we're little bit too close to home, and and not even to mention what he's gone through in his personal life, and with his village and his family, as far as COVID is concerned. But I do just want this fight to live up to the billing, mainly because not only do I would like to see something entertaining instead of just sitting there and mindlessly staring at the television for my own selfish purposes, but also because we did sacrifice Tony versus Khabib for this. Like this, that fight was placed on the altar, and that's a fight that style wise, on paper and everything, as many times they try to put it together, was just too good for us to not have. And now that we don't have it, and if we do get it, it'll be a diminished version of itself. I'd like to see the replacement for that live up to the levels of excitement that we know are possible. I just don't quite see it in this style matchup.
I'm just happy that we're getting winners fighting winners, you guys, because 2020 was looking bad for that for a little bit. All these, you know, fighters getting their shots off of losses and everything. But the last title fight too was actually winners versus winners, and that was being pushed a little bit by the boss man as going to be the greatest fight of the year, hands down, and everything. So I want to ask you guys: do you think that this one will end up being more competitive, I should say, than Adesanya versus Costa?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Even if one guy steamrolls the other, like what happened to Paulo Costa, it was just another level
Shout
of
out.
steamroll. That's yeah, that's just something else. Like that's like the Adesanya made Costa look like a child in there, and it's very rare that we see a performance like that. Like that was reminiscent of Anderson Silva versus Forrest Griffin, to where it's just perfection and you can't improve upon it. I don't see either one of those gentlemen being able to pull that off. We've seen Gaethje lose, so we know how it's possible. We know that he is not invincible. But with Khabib, we also, while he appears invincible at times, he did drop the I think it was the third round against Connor. He did have what the briefest of scary moments against Michael Johnson. So he was at least touched. Um, and that's kind of it. That's kind of it. But Adesanya Costa was just different. That's next level stuff right there.
Yeah, that was pretty much, to make it a boxing equivalent. That was Teofimo Lopez the first 7 rounds against Lomachenko this past weekend. So I think this is going to be, in terms of Khabib's competition that we've seen in the UFC. I think this is going to be a lot of the Gleason Tebow fight mixed in with a little bit of that Michael Johnson fight, and we see how it plays out from there. Because I think Justin is clearly going to give him the toughest fight out of anybody that he's faced so far. And I just think that he's going to not only be able to impose his will in spots, but win rounds, and I think he's very capable of winning the fight. I don't believe that Habib is invincible. It's just going to take that one guy to stay on his feet long enough to get off enough offense. Whoever is able to do that has a strong chance of beating Khabib. So, like Ant said, Connor took a round off of him because Connor was on his feet. So it's just, can you do that for at least 3 rounds? If you do that for 3 rounds, you're the champ. But easier said than done. Obviously, I'm making it sound very simple. Very simple.
Thanks for figuring this out, man. You figured it
Yeah.
all out.
Hey, I'm gonna write Dana and be like, look, I've got the solution. I can do it. Next
And you
month,
won't want it.
I can do it. I can make this happen. I will be the champion. The belt will be on the mantle behind me right here. It's that easy, guys.
You hear that? Could be Matt Wells is challenging you.
The funny thing about the that third round against Connor, though, just to talk about that a little bit, is I don't think that Habib even bothered shooting until like the last minute. I feel like he was really happy to kind of test himself on the feet for most of that round, and it's not like he got completely outclassed on the feet against Connor. That was a pretty competitive round, but just Connor edged him out. I think that's fair to say. Definitely Connor did get it, but he didn't completely outclass him or anything. And Habib just didn't try to wrestle. I think it was kind of like the first 2 rounds obviously were in his favor. He really doesn't like Connor. He's like, all right, let's play around a little bit. he didn't have the same success. All right, let's finish him now in this next one, kind of thing. And in terms of how I think that this fight will actually end up playing out, because I haven't really said specifically in terms of the competitiveness. Yeah, it's hard to imagine it being as one sided and as much of a shutout as Adesanya versus Costa. It's hard to imagine that in really any title fight for the most part. Um, so I think that this one could honestly look pretty similar to Poirier versus Habib. Because if you remember in that fight, I mean, in the second, it was the second or third round, the start of one of those rounds. Poirier was really coming at Habib and was landing on him pretty good. I argue to say even better than Michael Johnson landed on him for that brief, like 20, 30-second period in their fight. Poirier was really putting the pressure on Habib and doing very well while it was on the feet. And then even there was that scare where he had the guillotine on Habib, and I was kind of convinced that we were going to see him go out for a point. That was really locked in. We know there's kind of been a Dustin Poirier guillotine meme since his last fight now against Hooker, but yeah, I can see it looking similar to that one where the challenger, Gaethje, looks very capable of, finding his spots, and he looks like he has a chance to win. Like, but at the same time, once Habib does his thing, he's doing his thing, which, that's usually I feel like we haven't seen Habib's fights have that kind of those very quick momentum shifts, like we saw in the Poirier fight compared to everything in the past. So I think Gaethje is able to have those moments and give people glimmers of hope. Like, let's put it that way. But at the same time, Habib will be the one dominating for more periods of time. Let's put that. He'll be winning more often than he's not. I think that's the best way I can put it.
Let's say that's a good way to sum that up. Yeah, I say Khabib wins a decision here, and we kind of get the usual. And then after that, we can start having those really fun talks about what that potential 30-0 fight could be, and and whether or not GSP gets off the couch and they pay him enough money, or you can have a battle of the beards. I'll think I'll sit out on the buy round for this one. And yeah, I'm really excited for Saturday. But even if the fight doesn't deliver from an entertainment standpoint, I think either winner, something pretty special and historic might be taking place. So I'm looking forward to tuning in.
100%. If I had to give an official prediction, I'm rocking with Gaethje just for I'm rolling with the underdog on this one.
You trying to get that shirt?
Not very confident in it, but I'm rolling with the underdog here.